This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I will direct my questions to Mr. Cooper. You reported that, of no relation, you reported that Beijing's Toronto consulate directed clandestine funding through proxies in the 2019 election. Can you elaborate on how this scheme worked?
Again, I'm going to have to be very within the lines of the reporting that I did and not speak to the collection of sourcing, whether it be from persons with awareness of investigations or persons with awareness of the January 2022 Privy Council Office special report sourced from 100 CSIS reports. I have commented that this document is sourced from investigations started in the Toronto area in January 2019, according to my understanding. And the document very clearly states that, from my recollection, the Toronto consulate directed clandestine funding into an election interference network. And as the members know, the stories had great impact. We're here today because of that story. And I do need to not speak very freely about the sourcing or the methods that I understand. I need to stick to simply the stories speak for themselves.
And I recognize that. But the Prime Minister, in response to your reporting, has repeatedly claimed that he never was briefed about, quote, candidates receiving money from China. Now, it's my observation that that statement is very, very carefully crafted and deliberate, because it seems to me to be unlikely that Beijing would simply transfer funds directly to a candidate, that the scheme would be significantly more elaborate than that. So, based upon the intelligence that you reviewed, did Beijing indirectly fund candidates in the 2019 election through this clandestine network?
I'll, before answering your question, refer back to, I know the members paid close attention to the speech of MP Aaron O'Toole, and on his CSIS threat briefing, he spoke of, from my recollection, concrete funding of a misinformation product through the United Front Work Department directed from Beijing, so that funds are paid in Canada, my understanding of his speech, which funds a misinformation product, essentially from my understanding of his speech, to attack Mr. O'Toole's reputation. So I think it's fair to say that, conversely, I've explained in a number of interviews about my reporting, Beijing uses carrots and sticks. So if we were talking about the concrete funding of a misinformation product, a stick to attack a member of parliament, it is very reasonable, and according to sources with awareness of the investigations, to understand that the consulate is also directing funds into an election interference network comprised of many different types of individuals, comprised of what I understand and have read in a Privy Council Office intelligence assessment, media entities that are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. So with regards to your question, did Beijing fund candidates? It's my understanding they funded a network which is directed to support Beijing's preferred candidates. And as Member O'Toole told me in my interview for the first story, he wasn't going to speak to the exact methods of transfer. I don't know that CSIS has visibility on exchanges, physical exchanges, wire transfers. Perhaps, Mr. Elcock, technology has advanced, but I can tell you that CSIS has and studies FinTrack records, and that can, I believe and I understand that FinTrack records will provide revelations on direct methods of transfer and where money went.
Now, Mr. O'Toole did cite essentially four ways in which Beijing interfered in the 2021 election based upon your review of intelligence relating to the 2019 election. Is it accurate to say that they employed the same methods or similar methods?
I believe it's accurate to say that the United Front Work Department has a very large, very sophisticated networks of community proxies. I just reported in my first story for the Bureau several days ago that, citing the NSICOP 2019 Foreign Interference Review, the Consul General in Vancouver, round about 2015, boasted of controlling over 100 community groups. I have done a number of reports pointing towards the control of community groups and community leader proxies to support certain candidates, and this support can come through, according to the documents I've read, funds and media support, logistical support.
I know, Madam Chair, this is a rather delicate question, but I'm quite convinced that Mr. Cooper could answer it. When your sources confirm or deny information, what leads them to disclose? So there must be something deep within them that leads them to come to speak to you. So what can motivate these sources? What makes them come to you to talk about your subject?
It's a very simple answer. Again, my book, Willful Blindness, really grew out of disclosures from a casino anti-money laundering official named Ross Alderson. He was very concerned about the activity he saw, and his view was that there was willful blindness with British Columbia's government with regards to the lack of prosecution against transnational crime and money laundering. I understand that people in Ottawa, people in other jurisdictions, including the United States. I've said that people in the Pentagon were interested in my book. So there are officials at a high level that understand what's happening in Canada, and there are whistleblowers that don't believe that the adequate laws are in place to investigate and prosecute foreign interference. This can be the type of motivation for sources.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cooper, in your June 15th article in the Bureau, you indicate that in the NSICOP report from 2019 on foreign interference, that report states that, quote, there were important gaps in the documents, close quote, disclosed by the PCO to NSICOP. Are you able to elaborate upon that in any way?
I've read the document, and that story that you cite included a number of quotations, and I would say my very rigorous analysis of the document and the findings. The panel examined 620 intelligence documents representing over 4,000 pages of material, and they noted that CSIS was very forthcoming in disclosures. The RCMP was forthcoming. Public Safety Canada contributed little, is the wording, and the quotation that I wrote in that story was that there were important gaps in Privy Council office documents. So that was a terse statement, and there was no context beyond that statement. I can make an educated assessment that, as the honourable members know, the Privy Council office is there to give counsel on national security matters to the cabinet. And if there were important documents missing, it would lead me to speculate that perhaps there were records that would have provided more clarity on what was known about key risks. And I can't give the member any more information than that.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. You noted in your interview with Aaron O'Toole that you'll be reporting more on the Beijing police activities in Canada. You said, quote, "We now have reports of Beijing officials coming into Canada under false cover and acting within these so-called police networks. It's not just about buildings, it's about networks and community meetings," closed quote. So can you elaborate upon that?
Yes, I will be reporting on those matters further, but I think it's fair to share my generalized knowledge today about why my public interest standards are so focused on the issue. I understand from many years of source disclosure and knowledge that including my own ventures into Hong Kong Canadian and Chinese Canadian diaspora communities, Uyghur Canadian communities, that there is an unacceptable level of fear within some of these communities that foreign officials, suspected foreign officials, are coming into Canada. I reported on a case, again, citing my book, China's Most Wanted, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, was a man named Lai Cheng-sing. There are enough court documents that the members can search his case. I think this context is important. He came to Canada and was engaged in underground casino, money laundering, criminal activities. He was also, the evidence showed, quite connected to the various sectors of the Chinese security and intelligence apparatus, and yet he got on the wrong side of some people in Beijing, and they pursued him with police agents from the Ministry of Public Security and a special unit who came into Canada under false sort of business visas. And I understand that this activity has accelerated since 2015 in Canada. The police stations we now know of because of safeguard defenders, but it's about community networks with, my sources say, feared people acting both with officials from China to question people, to intimidate people in the community. And again, it's not about 6 or 7 known buildings in Canada, as the safeguard defenders say. This is about networks and the flow of communications between the Ministry of Public Security and, as we see in the indictments in the United States, proxies that live, work, and do business in communities. And that's what I am concerned about in cities, including Toronto and Vancouver.
Welcome to our guests, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Elcock, for being here. We note that the Liberals that have been the party in power for some 8 years now have been very quick to denounce your article, Mr. Cooper, and discredit it. But there were problems that you revealed in your article. And yet, on May the 3rd, 2018, the Prime Minister himself at World Press Freedom Day said that he said that he saluted journalistic freedom and he was very much against illegal arrests in some parts of the world that was intended to silence journalists. But now, Mr. Cooper, since your article, other journalists have followed up, have written articles, and the existence of what you confirmed has indeed been proven to be true. The Chinese police stations here, we learned Michael Chong, Aaron O'Toole, Jimmy Kwan also have been intimidated by Peking, and also members were informed about this by CSIS. Aaron O'Toole has confirmed it as well in terms of the interference in elections. But it would seem that the ministers and the Prime Minister have ignored all of this. and in fact, the relevancy of these disclosures have been even discounted by ministers. So, Mr. Cooper, I would like to hear you about Chinese interference, Beijing's interference in Canadian elections.
As I said in my opening statement, my knowledge of a Privy Council Office January 2022 special report cited that Beijing is threatening MPs who are critics of the Chinese Communist regime. So this is, I do think that MP Aaron O'Toole, in his speech in Parliament, in my view, accurately reflected that this is a growing, novel, expanding threat run through Beijing, or that is the Chinese Communist Party's United Front Work Department, which seeks to egregiously control and intimidate diaspora communities. In my opening statement, I also said that because of my groundbreaking book about the Chinese Communist Party's interference networks, I myself, a journalist, received a CSIS defensive threat brief in 2021, the same time period where other MPs, we've learned, were being subject of disinformation in WeChat channels. MP Aaron O'Toole said these were funded through the United Front Work Department. So the threat to Canada, in my view, is it's not my view, it's NSICOP 2019 Review's position that Australia and Canada are being attacked in almost the exact same manner, and yet Australia in 2018, due to media reports about two PRC-linked donors that had funded about 7 million Australian dollars to the three major parties, this implicated allegedly an Australian senator. The media furor that followed, that is the public discourse that followed those media leak disclosures, led to the Australian new counter-interference laws. Similar activity in the United Kingdom after a very firm disclosure about an individual with the United Front Work Department funding parliamentarians in Britain. They have followed up with laws. Canada is facing the same or worse threat, and most concerning, our diaspora community members. Many of them have stated openly they feel they're not protected. So this is the nature of the threat against journalists, community members, politicians. Most concerning to me, more than any, is that Canadians are under fear that they cannot speak openly about matters because a growing power from a foreign state is impacting lives in Canada.
And on the relevancy of having an independent inquiry, a public inquiry. We saw what happened to the independent rapporteur. It just came to a dead halt. What is your thought on an independent public inquiry?
My thoughts accord with many of the experts. I believe Mr. Elcock's colleague, Mr. Fadden, says a public inquiry should take place. A number of the witnesses you've already heard from say a public inquiry will remove the partisan bickering, the point scoring on either sides. You won't have to hear from more journalists that take the unusual step of being called to testify. There will be an independent, deep, rigorous public study of not only what happened, but what can we learn from Australia, the United Kingdom, the United States, New Zealand, and other nations, by the way, that are taking this very seriously. Germany, Taiwan. We need to learn from others in a public inquiry.
Thank you.